beginning of the recording. My friends call me Morkus. As I write these words, I am preparing for hypersleep. Time loses all meaning for me. We are in orbit around Jupiter, in this cold and lifeless space. Aboard the ship, we all feel the weight of the moment. Me and a few others, soldiers, scientists, engineers. We have all been waiting for this moment, but none of us expected that the path we have chosen would turn out as it has. Here, in this place, where space seems endless and cold, and the silence presses obsessively on our ears, we all understand that humanity is on the brink of destruction. We have all become part of this inevitable path. Our bodies have long since become accustomed to the confines of space, and our thoughts are focused on what lies ahead. We have been waiting for this moment for decades, maybe even centuries. But now that we are here, it seems to me that it was all a mistake. It doesn't matter what brought us here, faith in salvation or simply a desire for the unknown. What matters is this moment, when we will find out what lies ahead. I write these words down because no one must forget what happened. It is important. No one must forget what happened to us, what we found, what we survived. We must remember everything, because the future of Earth no longer exists. All that remains is us, and the horror that we must face. We must be ready. When the Ark Aeon returned, the entire planet watched this event, with bated breath, with hope. We all looked at it as if it were the last spark. People believed that the Ark would bring us salvation, a new planet, a new home, a new life. This ship was our last chance. We could not help but hope. But I, like many others, was sure that everything would end differently than we thought. I knew the Ark would return, but I didn't know what it would bring. I was sure it couldn't be salvation. It would probably be something even worse. Now, as I sit in this compartment, getting ready for bed, I realize that we are not saved. We are not here to find a solution, but to face something we cannot understand. We cannot go back. We must move forward. But I fear that what we find will be the last milestone in human history. The Earth is dying. I feel like every day we take brings us closer to the inevitable. The planet's resources are running out. The atmosphere is becoming increasingly unstable, lacking oxygen. Crops are failing, and the oceans are drying up. We sit in the center of the command center, feeling the world crumble around us. The mountains are dead. The forests are burning. The people who still believed the Ark would bring salvation look at it with empty eyes. I remember them watching, expecting something great. But I was different. I didn't believe. I knew the Ark would return, but I knew it wouldn't bring us what we hoped to find. We waited 700 years for the Ark. 700 years. When it finally appeared in orbit, I was among those scheduled to enter first. But when I saw it, when we began scanning its systems, both externally and internally, I felt uneasy. It wasn't as we expected. The sensors showed that the Ark was intact, but there was something in the air that made me feel uneasy. We had been waiting for this moment, but none of us were prepared for what awaited us on board. We had all hoped that the ship would contain people who had survived on that planet. But as we began preparing to enter, I realized that nothing on the Ark was as it should be, and I knew this would not be salvation. I write these words because I can't shake this feeling. We were sure the Ark would bring people, but instead, we found something completely different. And now we are all unsure if we will ever get back. We don't know what awaits us, but one thing is certain. We cannot allow this shadow of the past to creep into our future. The Ark returns when the Ark Aeon returned. I was among those first to enter. We had all been waiting for it, praying for its return. But none of us were prepared for what we found. We had been waiting for 700 years. 700 years is almost an entire generation, waiting for this moment to see what the Ark would bring. We thought it would be salvation. We believed that those who had left would bring with them the answers that would help us survive. But the reality was far more terrifying. When the Ark appeared in Earth orbit, for a moment I felt a glimmer of hope. It was so similar to the one that had left, and everything seemed so familiar. We scanned it, expecting to see signs of life. But as soon as the sensor data began to unfold, I felt uneasy. Everything looked as it should have, but something was wrong. We didn't know exactly what, but the feeling that something was wrong was almost tangible. On the screens, I saw the ship approaching, but there were no signals from the crew, no signs of life. We were expecting people who should have returned from the planet, those who had survived the journey. But there was no one. There was not a single living being in the space of the Ark. We began to worry, and this worry gradually grew into real horror. We tried to find any signs of life outside. Signals, radio waves, automatic systems, but nothing. Everything was too quiet. Some old data that we had received from on board rustled, but it was not clear enough to say exactly what was happening. This Ark, this symbol of our hope, was empty. From the moment we began scanning, I knew something was wrong. As the Ark finally settled into orbit and we began preparing for our first entry, I could already feel the foreboding under my fingernails. We were all tense, and although there was determination and hope on each of our faces, I knew that underneath it all, there was an inevitable fear. I looked at the faces of my colleagues, the engineers and scientists, trying to understand what they were feeling, but in their eyes I saw the same thing. The terror that we were all trying to hide. We were prepared for the Ark to be old. We knew that so much time had passed, and the ship could have suffered various damages. But we were not prepared for there to be no one alive on board, and that what we would find would be not just the old ship, but something much worse. When we stepped aboard, I immediately realized that the Ark was something different than we could have imagined. The smell was the first thing that struck me. It wasn't the usual smell of age or mustiness that you'd expect from an old spaceship. It was as if the ship had been abandoned here for a long time, forgotten and abandoned. It was the smell of something more sinister. I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back as I stepped inside. The feeling that we were not alone, that something was watching us, was impossible to ignore. The corridors of the Ark were dark and narrow, as if there was nothing alive in them, an emptiness reminiscent of a forgotten place. We began to move through its corridors, examining compartment after compartment. It is difficult to describe the feelings I experienced as I walked through the dead spaces, bathed in dim light, with air that seemed stagnant and heavy. The Ark was a dead machine, but it was not an ordinary dead machine. I felt that there was something inside it, something hidden, something alien. In one of the compartments, we found bodies. At first, I thought they were just dead people left in the escape pods. But as soon as I got closer, I realized these were not the people who had gone to the planet. These bodies were not just dead, they were distorted. So distorted that I could not believe my eyes. I stepped back, and it became difficult for me to breathe. It was impossible to get closer. The creatures that had once been people were now unrecognizable. It was not death. It was something more that had changed them beyond recognition. One body was so deformed that it took me a while to realize it was a person. Its skin was almost black, as if it had been burned, but at the same time, it seemed to be alive, with an unnatural shine. The joints were stretched to the limit. The muscles were overstretched, and everything looked as if the body had burned from the inside, but did not collapse. The eyes were closed, but their eyelids were so stretched that I could see the whites, which seemed to be burned. I stood next to the body, and it was difficult for me to breathe. I could not forget this horror. I saw it with my own eyes, but I did not know what it was. My partner, one of the scientists, tried to check the biometric indicators, but no device could give clear data. Everything was distorted. All the measurements were outside the norm. The body continued to be preserved in some strange state, not decomposed, but not alive. And then I realized something was wrong here. We were not alone on this ship. Horrible details. We continued to explore the Ark, moving further. But with each step, I felt more and more horror filling me. In one of the compartments, we found a woman. She was in the pilot seat. It seemed she could not leave her seat. I came closer and saw her distorted face. It was like a mask stretched to the limit. Her skin was cracked, as if it had turned to stone, and the cracks on her face seemed to represent some strange torment that she had experienced before her death. Her hands were fixed on the control panel, as if she was trying to do something, trying to stop something, but could not. It was so strange and so scary. I stood there, looking at her, but I could not understand how this was possible. We all saw her, but we could not understand what had happened. We could not understand what could turn a living person into such a creature. Then we found the onboard computer records. We hooked it up to our systems, hoping that at least it would give us some answers. But what we saw was worse than we could have ever imagined. The recordings recorded everything, every detail. And there was something in those recordings that made my heart clench. The recordings showed people on the planet Irius mining minerals from its surface, digging. But they didn't know what they'd found. They'd found an artifact. It was something ancient, incredibly old, like it was made millions of years ago. And it wasn't just an object. It was changing everything around it. And according to the recordings, it was changing people. They were starting to lose their human form. Their bodies and minds were breaking down. It was something that was making them die, but not in the usual sense of the word. Their bodies weren't decomposing. They weren't showing signs of aging. They were simply becoming something else. The scariest thing was that they were trying to leave. They tried to escape, but the Ark they had left the planet on did not save them. They were burning from the inside. Their bodies could not withstand the effects of the artifact they had found. Everything was recorded in the last recordings. We all felt the horror squeezing us in a trap. We did not know what awaited us, but we knew one thing. We cannot leave all this behind. We must go further. We must find the artifact. We must destroy it before it destroys us. But I am not sure that we will survive. And at this moment, as I write these words, I no longer know what awaits us. We are heading to the planet where they found this artifact, and we must find out what exactly it is. I am not sure that we can cope, but I know one thing. If we do not destroy it, we will all be trapped. End of entry. I end my story here, for the hyperspace jump is ahead, and I do not know what awaits us on Irius. Perhaps when I wake up, we will have to face this artifact. Our lives depend on what we find there. When we arrive in orbit, perhaps everything will be decided. But one thing is for sure. If we do not destroy this evil, we will all be trapped.